understand. They hear rhythms, emotions, pauses, and patterns. They absorb language naturally, without pressure, without fear, without exams. No one tells a child, "Speak correctly or you will fail." No one laughs when a child makes mistakes. That is why children learn languages effortlessly. They begin with silence, not speech. They begin with understanding, not performance. As an adult, you were never taught this truth. You were pushed to memorize grammar rules, forced to translate word by word, and judge for every mistake. Slowly, fear replaced curiosity. Hesitation replaced confidence. And English became a burden instead of a bridge. Now you want to speak, but your mind freezes. Words hide. Sentences collapse. You know English, yet you cannot use it. This is not your fault. The real first step to English fluency is building English inside your mind, quietly, patiently, daily, without pressure. You must allow English to live in your thoughts before it comes out of your mouth. When English becomes your internal language, speaking becomes automatic, effortless, natural. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is comfort. If you feel uncomfortable while speaking English, it means English has not yet become familiar to your brain. And the brain only becomes familiar with what it hears repeatedly in a relaxed state. That is why listening is the foundation. Silent exposure is the beginning. Mental immersion is the real start. Start by allowing English to enter your daily life without asking anything from yourself. Do not demand perfection. Do not demand speaking. Simply let English surround you. Listen to English while walking, while cooking, while resting. Do not translate. Do not pause to understand every word. Understanding comes later. Familiarity comes first. At first, English will sound fast, confusing, and distant. That is normal. Stay with it. Slowly, patterns will appear. Common words will repeat. Sentences will feel familiar even if you cannot explain them. This is your brain learning subconsciously. This is progress happening silently. Most learners quit here because they think nothing is happening. But something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Your brain is building an internal map of English. You are developing intuition. And intuition is what fluent speakers use, not grammar rules. Grammar is a tool, not a foundation. Think about how you speak your native language. You do not think about tenses. You do not remember rules. You simply know. That knowing comes from years of listening and mental exposure. English must follow the same path. Your job at the beginning is not to speak English. Your job is to think in English, even imperfectly, even silently, even slowly. Start with simple thoughts. While doing daily activities, gently label things in English in your mind. You do not need full sentences. One word is enough. Water, phone, walking, waiting. Then slowly allow small phrases to form. I am tired. This is difficult. I need time. These thoughts do not need to be spoken. They need to be felt. When English becomes the language of your inner voice, fear disappears. Because you are no longer performing for others. You are simply being yourself in English. Many learners believe they must first improve vocabulary before fluency. But vocabulary learned without context is heavy and useless. Words learned through listening and inner thinking are light and alive. They stick. They return naturally when needed. You do not need thousands of words to begin. You need repetition of the same simple words in different contexts. That repetition builds depth. Depth creates confidence. Confidence creates fluency. Stop chasing complexity. Fluency is born from simplicity mastered deeply. Another silent step is allowing yourself to understand English without translating. Translation is a bridge, but it becomes a prison if you stay on it too long. At first, translation feels safe, but fluency requires direct understanding. When you hear, "I'm running late," you should feel the meaning instantly, not search for words in your native language. This direct understanding only comes through exposure, through patience, through trust. Trust the process even when results are invisible. You may feel slow, you may feel behind, but language learning is not a race. It is an internal transformation. Some changes happen quietly. Some changes happen suddenly. One day, you will realize you understood a sentence without effort. Another day, you will respond without planning. That is when you will know English has entered your system. Silence is not failure. Silence is preparation. Even when you are not speaking, your brain is working. Every sentence you hear is shaping your future speech. Every phrase you recognize is strengthening neural pathways. Every moment you stay calm, instead of anxious, is accelerating learning. Fear blocks language. Calm invites it. If you want fluency, stop pressuring yourself to speak early. Let English grow roots first. Strong roots create strong trees. Weak roots create broken confidence. Your pronunciation will improve naturally when your ear improves. You cannot pronounce what you cannot hear correctly. Listening trains the ear. The ear trains the tongue. This order cannot be reversed. That is why forcing speaking too early creates frustration. You are asking your tongue to do something your brain is not ready for yet. Give yourself permission to be silent. This silence is not empty. It is full of learning. You may feel lonely in this journey. Others may laugh or criticize. Ignore them. They see the surface. They do not see the foundation you are building. Real fluency is invisible until it suddenly becomes visible. Remember, this confidence in English does not come from speaking perfectly. It comes from feeling safe in the language. Safety comes from familiarity. Familiarity comes from exposure. Every fluent speaker you admire once listened silently for a long time. They struggled privately. They doubted themselves. They continued anyway. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be. Your first step to English fluency is not speaking loudly. It is listening deeply, thinking gently, absorbing patiently. Speak later. Fluency will meet you halfway. One day, without warning, English will come out of you, not forced, not memorized, not feared, but natural, calm, and confident. And when that happens, you will realize the truth you were never taught. Fluency begins in silence. Silence, when chosen consciously, becomes power. In that silence, your brain reorganizes itself. It starts recognizing English not as a foreign enemy, but as a familiar presence. This is where real learning hides. Not in noise, not in performance, but in quiet repetition. When you stop chasing fluency and instead allow fluency to come to you, something shifts internally. The struggle softens, resistance fades, and English begins to feel less like a subject and more like a companion. Most people misunderstand effort. They believe effort means forcing action. But in language learning, effort means consistency without tension. It means showing up every day without emotional violence against yourself. When you sit with English calmly, even passively, your brain absorbs patterns the way skin absorbs sunlight. You do not feel it happening, but over time, the change becomes undeniable. This is why people who live among English speakers often become fluent without studying. Their environment does the work. How do ears do the learning? Their minds adapt naturally. You may not have that environment physically, but you can create it mentally. Through audio, through stories, through voices that become familiar. Familiarity creates belonging, and belonging removes fear. Fear is the real enemy of fluency, not grammar, not vocabulary. Fear of being judged, fear of sounding foolish, fear of making mistakes. But fear cannot survive where there is no performance. When you are only listening, only thinking, only absorbing, fear has nothing to attack. That is why this first step is so powerful. It heals your relationship with English. Once that relationship heals, progress accelerates. Your mind is not lazy. It is protective. It shuts down when it feels threatened. When you force yourself to speak before you are ready, your mind senses danger and freezes. Words disappear not because you do not know them, but because your brain is defending you. Calm removes that defense. Calm unlocks access. This is why relaxed exposure works better than intense study. This is why gentle listening works better than aggressive practice. This is why people improve more when they stop trying so hard. Let English play in the background of your life. Let it exist without demand. You are not testing yourself. You are training yourself. Training is patient. Testing is cruel. Over time, you will notice subtle changes. English sentences will stop feeling foreign. Your brain will begin predicting words before they are spoken. You will feel meaning before translation. This is the birth of intuition. Intuition is what fluent speakers trust. They do not calculate sentences. They feel them. That feeling comes from exposure, not explanation. You may worry that without speaking, you will never speak. This fear is understandable but false. Speech is not learned by forcing speech. Speech emerges when internal language is strong enough to spill out naturally. Think of a glass slowly filling with water. Speaking is not pouring water in. Speaking is when the glass overflows. Your job is to fill the glass. Every hour of listening fills it. Every moment of thinking in English fills it. Every sentence you understand without effort fills it. And one day, you will speak without forcing. Not perfectly, but confidently. Not flawlessly, but freely. Freedom matters more than perfection. Many learners wait for permission to speak. Permission from teachers, from fluency tests, from confidence. But confidence does not come before speaking. Confidence comes from understanding. When you understand English deeply, you trust yourself, and trust creates courage. Until then, silence is not weakness. Silence is training. Do not measure your progress by how much you speak. Measure it by how calm you feel around English. Measure it by how familiar English sounds. Measure it by how often you think in English without noticing. These are signs of real growth. Your accent does not matter right now. Your mistakes do not matter right now. What matters is building an internal English environment where your mind feels safe, curious, and engaged. Curiosity accelerates learning more than discipline ever could. When you listen to English content you enjoy, your brain opens. Stories, conversations, speeches, podcasts. These feed your mind naturally. Your brain remembers what it enjoys. Enjoyment creates repetition without boredom. Repetition builds mastery. This is why boring study fails and engaging exposure succeeds. Do not punish yourself for not understanding everything. Understanding everything is not the goal. Understanding more over time is the goal. Fluency is gradual clarity, not instant perfection. Allow confusion. Confusion is part of learning. Confusion means your brain is stretching. Stay with it. Do not escape back to your native language too quickly. Sit with uncertainty. Your brain will resolve it when ready. Patience is not passive. Patience is powerful. As days pass, your inner voice will change. At first, English thoughts will be slow, broken, incomplete. That is fine. Fluency does not begin with elegance. It begins with presence. The more you allow English thoughts to exist, the stronger they become. Do not correct yourself harshly in your mind. Do not interrupt your thinking to judge grammar. Let thoughts flow. Accuracy comes later. Fluency comes first. You learned your first language without correction. You can learn your second the same way. There will be moments when you feel stuck, when progress feels invisible, when motivation drops. This is normal. Growth often hides before it reveals itself. Trust the process even when you cannot see results. Every fluent speaker you admire once felt exactly like you do now. The difference is not talent. The difference is persistence without self-hatred. If you continue listening, thinking, absorbing, your brain will eventually demand expression. You will want to speak, not because you must, but because you can. That moment is powerful. That moment is earned. And when you speak then, it will not feel like performance. It will feel like release. Remember this always: English is not something you conquer. English is something you invite. Invite it daily, gently, quietly, consistently. Let it live in your mind before it leaves your mouth. That is the first step, and it is enough. And as you remain in this quiet stage, something unexpected begins to happen. English stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like atmosphere. It surrounds you rather than confronts you. You no longer prepare yourself mentally before listening. You no longer feel tension in your chest when you hear fast sentences. The language begins to pass through you instead of stopping you. This is not coincidence. This is conditioning. Your brain is adapting because you allowed it time. Time is the ingredient most learners deny themselves. You live in a world that demands speed, results, proof. But language is organic. It grows like a tree, not like a machine. You cannot pull the leaves to make it taller. You can only water the roots. Listening, thinking, and silent exposure are that water. They may feel small, but they are decisive. At this stage, you may notice that English emotions start to make sense. Not just words, but tone. Sarcasm, kindness, confidence, doubt. You begin to feel when a sentence is soft or strong, even if you cannot explain why. This emotional understanding is a major milestone. It means English is no longer only intellectual. It is becoming intuitive. Intuition is fluency's true engine. You are no longer decoding English. You are sensing it. And sensing comes before speaking naturally. When you sense meaning, your responses become automatic. You stop searching for words because the words begin to find you. This is why forcing conversation too early is damaging. It interrupts this internal development. It replaces intuition with anxiety. But when you protect this phase, when you honor silence instead of rushing past it, your future speech becomes smooth instead of strained. There is a quiet confidence that develops here. You may not speak yet, but you feel closer to the language. You feel less like an outsider. You stop saying, English is difficult, and start saying, English is familiar. That mental shift is everything. Difficulty creates resistance. Familiarity creates openness. And openness accelerates learning faster than any technique. You may notice that your memory improves. Words you never tried to memorize suddenly stay with you. Phrases repeat themselves in your mind. You recognize expressions in different contexts. This is deep learning. This is the brain connecting language to life, not to textbooks. Textbooks teach structure. Life teaches usage. When English becomes part of your internal life, it stops being fragile. You no longer fear forgetting it. You no longer feel like you lose everything after one bad day, because it is no longer stored only in memory. It is stored in experience. This is why fluent speakers can stop studying and still remain fluent. Their English is embodied. You are building that embodiment now, quietly. There may be moments when impatience returns, when you feel the urge to test yourself, how to prove something, to speak just to check. Be gentle with that urge. Testing too early can confuse growth with failure. Silence does not mean stagnation. Silence means incubation. Everything meaningful incubates before it emerges. Eggs hatch in darkness. Seeds break underground. Language forms internally before it becomes audible. Respect that natural order. You are not behind. You are preparing. When you finally begin to speak, you will notice something strange. You will not feel like you are constructing sentences. You will feel like you are remembering them, as if the language was already there, waiting. This is because it was. You planted it through listening. You watered it through thinking. You protected it through silence. Speech will feel imperfect, yes, but it will feel alive. And a live language grows quickly. Perfection is static. Fluency is dynamic. You do not need to sound like a native speaker to be fluent. You need to sound like yourself, clearly understood, confidently expressed. That confidence does not come from accent drills. It comes from internal comfort. Comfort comes from familiarity. And familiarity comes from exposure without fear. Fearless exposure is the real method. If you commit to this path, something deeper changes too. Your relationship with learning itself transforms. You stop seeing mistakes as evidence of failure. You see them as signs of movement. You stop hiding from English. You welcome it. And when you welcome a language, it welcomes you back. You begin to notice English everywhere. In songs, in science, in thoughts, in dreams. That is not obsession. That is integration. Integration means the language is becoming part of who you are, not just something you study. At that point, speaking becomes inevitable. You will speak when you are ready, not when you are forced. You will speak because expression becomes natural, not because silence feels like weakness. And when you speak then, people will feel the difference. They will hear calm instead of panic, flow instead of tension, meaning instead of memorization. That is real fluency. And it all began with a decision that seemed small and invisible to others. A decision to stop fighting the language,